Hello, I'm Louise Jordan and welcome to this video series Discovering Florence Nightingale through Songwriting. This is the fourth in a series of 5 videos where I explore 5 themes relating to Florence Nightingale whilst sharing 5 aspects of my songwriting process. So far, I've shared my ideas on how to generate ideas for a song, turning ideas into lyrics, writing a catchy chorus, and writing verses to develop your ideas further. I hope you'll enjoy this video if you're interested in finding out about Florence Nightingale, and also if you're interested in writing songs, whether you've written before or not. If you're working through these videos and writing your own song at the same time, you might want to pause at certain points to carry out some of the tasks I suggest. I've been asked more than once whether I think Florence Nightingale was a feminist. The difficulty with that question is the term feminist didn't exist when Florence was alive in the same way that we might think of feminism today. What I'm more interested in is how Florence Nightingale perceived gender and how she navigated a world that was so divided along gender lines. And I'm particularly interested in Florence's views because she has often been depicted as a virtuous or model woman. Florence Nightingale was born in 1820, 17 years before Queen Victoria began her 63-year reign. So Florence grew up at a time where the expectations of a privileged woman were to learn some genteel skills that would make her an attractive catch before finding a husband and producing children. The world was separated into 2 spheres, the woman's sphere, the home, and the man's sphere, the outside world. As the angel in the home, part of the woman's role was to practice moral virtue, whilst being subservient. The Nightingale family was wealthy and could afford 2 stately homes as well as extended trips into Europe. Florence's mother didn't work, and Florence and her sister Parthenope had a governess. Although Florence's parents agreed to her requests to learn mathematics, they didn't allow her to undertake official training as a nurse, a profession considered well below the family's status. They also reluctantly agreed for Florence to travel with family friends, to visit charitable institutions both in Britain and abroad. They seemed to think that her poor health and anxiety would soon fade away and that she would come back to settle into family life. However, Florence chose to follow her vocation above marriage. She believed that God had called her to his service and asked her to save lives. In a private note to herself, Florence outlines her thoughts. I have an intellectual nature which requires satisfaction, and that would find it in him. I have a passionate nature which requires satisfaction, and that would find it in him. I have a moral and active nature which requires satisfaction, and that would not find it in his life. I don't think this can necessarily be taken as an outright rejection of marriage, more as an acceptance that the sort of relationship that would be offered to her through marriage at the time she was living would not enable Florence to realise what she knew she was capable of. I'm fascinated by a piece of writing that Florence began, aged 22, called Cassandra. Cassandra was a tormented figure in Greek mythology. I won't go into detail here, but mention it in case it's of interest. Florence's piece Cassandra developed over time, and she sought the advice of leading theologians before deciding not to publish. A much revised version was later published in 1928, after Florence's death. In Cassandra, Florence discusses marriage, family, and the expectations of women living in the 19th century. A woman dedicates herself to the vocation of her husband. She fills up and performs the subordinate parts in it. A man gains everything by marriage. He gains a helpmate, but a woman does not. I wonder what Florence would think of marriage in the 21st century and discussions about the mental load, which suggests that women do more tasks in the home and take on responsibility for organising family life because they feel it's expected of them. Here's one of my favourite Florence quotes. "A married woman was heard to wish that she could break a limb, that she might have a little time to herself." Florence also uses Cassandra to question the limitations of expectations. The family uses people not for what they are, not for what they are intended to be, but for what it wants them for its own uses. If it wants someone to sit in the drawing room, that someone is to be supplied by the family, though that member may be destined for science or for education or for active superintendence by God, i.e., by the gifts within. Songwriters are often asked whether they write the words or the music first. In reality, I often write both at the same time. I'm going to work through 2 song examples. In the first, I wrote the music and words together, and in the second, the words came slightly before the music. The first song is called Idle Women, and the idea for the song came from another of my favourite Florence Nightingale quotes. "We do the best we can to train our women to an idle, superficial life. We teach them music and drawing, languages and poor peopling, resources as they are called, and we hope that if they don't marry, they will at least be quiet." I wrote the song Idle Woman as an extra song for the live show Florence. There was a space early on for a light-hearted song, and I knew that I wanted the audience to sing along. I started throwing ideas around about the quote Idle Women and making notes to break it down. I looked at the word idle so many times and said it out loud that it started to feel like a nonsense, so I stumbled on the idea of turning it into a nonsense song. I decided I wanted the audience to sing the word idle. The whole concept is a bit of a nonsense to me, the idea of a woman being idle, so it felt quite fitting. I turned the word idle into the phrase idle-dee-idle-dee, idle-dee-die. There's a tradition of using nonsense words in folk songs and children's songs, for example, Hey Diddle Diddle, The Cat and the Fiddle. I didn't know until I was planning this video, but these are called non-lexical vocables, and they're used in various forms of music, from the scatting of jazz music to yodeling, and even in Disney songs, like in Mary Poppins' unforgettable Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious and Chim Chim Cheree. Here's one of the verses from Idle Women. "There was a woman who lived as a maid, singing idle-dee-idle-dee, idle-dee-die. Her hours were long, but she barely got paid, singing idle-dee-idle-dee, idle-dee-die." When I wrote the song Idle Women, the words and the music came to me at the same time, but that doesn't always happen. It might be useful to break down composing your melody into 2 sections. Firstly, establishing the rhythm, and secondly, deciding on the pitch or the tune for the notes. It might be useful to say the lines out loud and work out where you naturally stress different syllables or words. For example, there was a woman who lived as a maid. There was a woman who lived as a maid. There was a woman who lived as a maid. I wanted the melody to be simple, so I wanted to find a straightforward rhythm. Easy rhythms tend to have a 3 or 4 beat pulse for each line. I'm not talking about the notes per bar or the time signature here. I'm not going to get into the music theory. For Idle Women, I chose a 4 beat pulse, so that meant fitting the syllables in each line over 4 beats. The first line has 10 syllables. There was a woman who lived as a maid. In order to stress the word was, I decided to make sure that it fitted on the first beat of the line. There was a woman who lived as a maid, instead of there was a woman who lived as a maid. In music theory, this is technically known as an upbeat. When I'm writing, I just play around with the words to make them fit over the pulse that I've identified. So I could have had, there was a woman who lived as a maid, or there was a woman who lived as a maid. The rhythm of the refrain was a bit more tricky because it's not a real word. So to fit it over the 4-beat pulse, I had to spread the syllables out, and I could have done this evenly. Idle-dee-di-da-lee-di, idle-dee-di-da-lee-di. But I decided to add something that I felt was a bit more lilting and fitting with the idea of the song. Idle-dee-diddle-dee, idle-dee-di, idle-dee-diddle-dee, idle-dee-di. Songwriters, you might want to pause the video here whilst you decide what pulse you're going to use. You could use a 3 or 4 beat pulse for each line, or you could try something more elaborate. Next, fit the lines of your verse or chorus into the pulse that you've decided. Which word do you want to fit over the first beat of each line? Once you've decided the pulse and rhythm for your song, the next task is to look at the tune or pitch of the notes. When I wrote Idle Women, I knew I wanted it to be uplifting, a sort of song joke with a punchline, so I decided to use a major key. If the starting note for your song is going to be middle C, you could choose a major or a minor scale. You could have la 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 major, or la 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 a minor scale. There are other types of scales and keys, but that's outside the scope of this video. If you are interested to look further, I suggest you look up modes. With Idle Women, I kept coming back to the idea that I wanted people to join in with the song. I wanted to be able to teach it to them during the live song and for them to pick it up quickly. So the most of the notes would need to be next to each other and rise and fall gradually, rather than having large intervals in between different words and syllables. So, there was a woman who lived as a maid, rather than there was a woman who lived as a maid, for example. I started by finding a pitch that was comfortable for me to sing, and then I asked for feedback from other people on whether they could easily join in with it, so eventually the whole pitch of the song and the starting note came down. I wanted the focus of the first line to be on the word was, so I had decided already to put that on the first beat. And I also decided with the pitch of that note that it should be on the first note of the scale that I had chosen. So if that's the first note of my scale, I wanted was to be on that note, and the upbeat that came before could be placed on another note around it. There was, or there was. Although lots of songs start with the first word on the first note of the scale, not all do, and that's another choice that you need to make as the songwriter. Songwriters, you might want to pause here to decide whether you'll use a major or a minor scale, or whether you want to explore modes or another format. Whether you want your melody to be easy to join in with, for example, in the chorus or in the refrain. And you might want to try out some melodic ideas for both the verse and the chorus. Just remember to make a note or record them. The second song example that I'm going to share is Pedestal. It was written in response to some of the different ways that Florence Nightingale's work has been framed to suit different people's narratives. For example, Florence came to public acclaim after the Crimean War, during which time she worked as a nurse. She was then placed on a pedestal as a national hero, perhaps because the media wanted to have a positive story during and in the aftermath of the Crimean War.
They put you on a pedestal, a pedestal, a pedestal. They put you on a pedestal so high. They put you on a pedestal so they can choose to make you fall. They put you on a pedestal so high. They claim you as their heroine, their heroine, their heroine. They claim you as their heroine of war. They claim you as their heroine, angel of mercy so feminine. They claim you as their heroine of war.
When I wrote the song Pedestal, I started with the lyrics first and then gave some time for the ideas to develop before I came back to writing the melody and accompaniment. When I wrote Idle Woman, the music and lyrics came mostly at the same time. I think it's important for the meaning of a song to be contained as much in the music as it is in the lyrics. I began with Pedestal by speaking the words out loud, and I identified a 4-beat pulse. I liked the idea of the repetition in the first line, sounding like a question. They put you on a pedestal, a pedestal, a pedestal. This fitted with one of the themes of the song and of the live show that was developing at the time, that of gossip. That somebody's memory can be recreated after their death by the ways that their story is told and retold over time. Pedestal is a protest song, so I wanted it to have a sense of drive and passion, and I wanted the words of each verse to have a sense of urgency and for the energy to build with each line. I tried to achieve this by making the pitch of each line rise, and then in the 4th line to drop off, so that in the subsequent verse it could rise again. I also thought that this had a resonance with the idea of gossip getting out of proportion and control each time that it's repeated. Unlike in Idle Woman, I wanted this to be a brooding and cynical song, so I decided on a minor scale which I thought reflected this musically. And I wanted the different labels attributed to Florence to be sort of spat out and exclaimed. They put you on a pedestal, a pedestal. So I knew that the 3rd beat of the line would need to be emphasised. They put you on a pedestal. As with Idle Women, pedestal has an upbeat in the first line. They put, so I decided that put should be on the first note of the scale that I'd chosen. I found the pitch that was comfortable for me, and you could do this by saying the line out loud and then slowing it down and pausing when you get to the first syllable. They put you on a pedestal. They put you on a pedestal, they put you on a pedestal, they put you on a pedestal. It's all about slowing it down and trying to work out which bits you want to emphasise. Songwriters, you might want to pause here to consider the meaning of your song. Have you expressed this meaning in the verses and choruses of your song? How could you adapt the song to make it more reflective of its meaning and make sure that it resonates with the listener? I find Florence Nightingale's ability to overcome the many barriers that she faced in her life inspirational, and I find it interesting to reflect on how far things have and haven't developed in the 200 years since her birth. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found some useful ideas for composing a melody, and I hope you've enjoyed exploring some of Florence Nightingale's views on gender. In the final video of this series, I'll look at writing an accompaniment for a song, and I'll also explore some of Florence Nightingale's international campaigning work.